Hello everyone and welcome to Beginner's Code. Today we are going to learn how we can use Flask and JavaScript to create a number guessing game that runs all in the front end. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and drop a like below. So the first thing that we need to do in our number guessing game is create a Python file, and this will hold our Flask code. So we'll just call it number. I'll add guess just in case. And then we need to import Flask. So if you haven't already got Flask installed on your computer, then you just need to run pip install Flask on the terminal. So from Flask, import Flask, render template, and JSONify. And that will allow us to actually use JSON. And then we will also import random. So what we'll do is we'll create a app variable. We'll set this equal to Flask, which is the standard procedure when you are creating a Flask app. So now we can create our root. Our first root will just be / and this will be the home page. So we'll define the index. And here we'll just return render template, index.html, and we will also pass in random number. And we'll set that equal to random number. Okay, so now we want to create another root. And while this is all going to happen in the same window, we need to have another root for our our XML request to happen. So what we'll do is we'll create app.root and we'll call this random_number. Now what we'll do is we'll create a function, and this will be random number, and this will just get a random number for us. So we'll say random number is equal to random.randint, and we'll say between 1 and 100. And then we will return in JSON the random number, and we will just say random number is equal to random number. And then finally, at the end of our file, we need to say if name, and we'll just say = main, then app.run, and we will say debug true, just in case we come into any errors. So now that we've got our number guessing Python Flask, we will create a new folder, and this will have our static files, and then we'll have a templates folder, and this will have our HTML files. So inside the index.html, inside the templates, we'll create our index.html, and here we'll just use a HTML5 boilerplate, change the title to random number just for good procedures. And then here we need to also link to a CSS file. Now to do this, we pass in curly brackets, some ginger syntaxing, and we'll say URL for, and then here we'll say static, and then we'll pass in the file name, and we'll say styles.css. Now we just need to create some layout for our number guessing game. So the heading one, we'll just say guess the number. And then here we'll create a p tag with the ID of hint. And then we'll create an input, and this input will be type of number. And then we'll say ID guess, and placeholder of please enter your guess. And then we'll say a button, and this button will have the ID of submit. So this will be our submit button, and we'll say submit guess. And then finally at the bottom we will have a script tag, and here we will have our source as, again, URL for, and we'll pass in static, and then we'll say file name is equal to scripts.js. So now that we have our HTML file, we can go over to our static folder, and we'll create our styles.css. and inside the static folder we'll also create our scripts.js. So now if I come over to the terminal and I cd into number guessing, and then if I say python3 numberguess.py, and we head over to our local host, so we have guess the number with a input and a submit button. So now if we want to add some styling, so what we'll do is we'll style the whole body, say text align center, margin top of 100 pixels, and font family Arial sans serif. Next we'll say the heading 1 will be font size of 36 pixels and margin bottom of 20 pixels. And then we'll use the input tag and we'll say font size 18 pixels, padding of 8 pixels all around, and then margin bottom of 10 pixels. And then finally the button we will style just with font size of 18 pixels, padding 10 pixels by 20 pixels, so 10 pixels top and bottom, 20 pixels left and right. And we'll say cursor pointer, and this will just allow our cursor to actually have a little hand whenever you hover over the button. So now if we refresh this, we have a little bit more styling and you'll see exactly what I mean. So now we want to start working on our JavaScript. Now what we'll do is, just to make sure that this is actually working or linked up, we'll just console log working into our local host. So if we refresh the page now and go to the console, we have working. So the first thing that we need to do is add a event listener for when the document has been, all the content has been loaded in the document. So we'll say document.add event listener. We'll say DOM content loaded, and we'll create a function. So now we want to get a few of our elements by either their ID or by class name. So because we've given them IDs of hint, guess and submit, we can easily grab what we need. So var hint is equal to document.getElementById, and we'll say hint. And then the guess input, we will say getElementById guess. And then the submit button, we will say document.getElementById and submit. And then we're going to create two new variables. So we'll say var random number, and this is going to be the number that we retrieve using our XML HTTP request. And then the user guess will set to 0, and that will just essentially be tracking the amount of times a user guesses. So now we need to use our XML HTTP requests. So we'll say var xhr is equal to new XML HTTP request. And this just allows our JavaScript to actually interact with a web server. Next we'll say xhr.onReadyStateChange, and we'll set that equal to a function. And then we'll say if xhr.readyState is double equal to 4 and xhr.status is double equal to 200, not 2000, 200. Then we will use the random number variable that we created above, and we will set that equal to json.parse, and we will set that equal to the XHR response text and dot random number, because that's the random number that we are going to be retrieving from the Flask file here. So this random number as JSONify, we will be passing into this random number variable here. Then we will say xhr.open and we'll say get, and then here we pass in / random number, which is the URL set here, and we will pass in true, and then we'll say xhr.send. So now that we have our random number and this is all done in the front end, we can now use an event listener to see when an answer has been guessed. So we'll say submit button dot add event listener, and then we'll pass in click, and we will create a function. So we'll say user guess is equal to pass int, and we'll say guess input dot value, and then this is meant to be user guesses, so this is the amount of times a user has guessed, and this is the user guess. So user guesses, we will here increment by 1. Now we can check to see if the random number is defined. So if random number does not equal undefined, then we need to set some logic to say whether or not it's too high, too low, or they've got it right. So now we'll say if user guess is less than random number. Now we will set the hint, or the p tag of hint, the text content, to say too low, try a higher number. I'm just going to close these to make it a little bit more readable. Now we'll say else if the user guess is greater than the random number, and we'll pass in hint.text content, and now we'll say too high, try a lower number. Else if the user guess is triple equal to random number, so if it's exactly the same if it's exactly the same with it both being numbers, or both the same data type, shall I say. Now we'll say hint.text content, and we'll say congratulations, you guessed the correct number and now we'll say user guesses. Need to change these from strings to backticks. So this will actually say, congratulations, you guessed the correct number in 2 guesses. And then we'll say else, and here we'll just console log error. And then if it is undefined, we will also console log there is no defined random number. So now if we head back to our Chrome and we refresh, now if I say 4 and submit the guess, undefined is not valid JSON. So after going through loads of lines of code, I actually found out that the reason why it was returning undefined was because I put response text and not response text. But to find out how I did this, I console logged json.parse, and I passed in xhr.response text. And then I had a look on here and it was saying random number 16. So then I chained random number onto the end. And it was saying that there was actually a number. So then I realised that there was something wrong with this and realised that it was actually missing an S. So now this should all work. So if we refresh this now and we say 4, too low, okay, so we'll say 72, too high, we'll say 45, too high, 24, too low, 39, too high, 30, too high, 29, too high, 28, too high, 27. Congratulations, you guessed the correct number in 9 guesses. Hopefully this has helped you grasp how you can make single-page websites that allow your JavaScript to make HTTP requests in the front end. If you learned something in this video, please drop a like and subscribe to my channel to see much more like this.